Alrighty, hi there, and welcome to this day in history for February 1st. February 1st is the 32nd day of the year in the Gregorian calendar, with 333 days remaining to the end of the year, except for leap years when there are 334 days remaining to the end of the year. Today's word is ratify. You might remember that yesterday we came across the word ratification, and it looked like a good word to explore, so here we go. We'll start by seeing that ratify is a verb that means to confirm, establish, settle conclusively, or accept and sanction as something done by an agent or a representative to confirm as a valid act or procedure. That said, ratification is a noun that means the act of ratifying, the state of being ratified, confirmation, sanction. The word ratification has a couple of slightly more complex legal definitions, but that basically have to do with the act of ratifying and only in certain specific conditions. So now we're going to start way back in the way back, all the way back to 1327. That's when Edward III, also known as Edward of Windsor, he was about 14 years old at the time, and he was crowned King of England. Of course, he himself wasn't fully in charge quite yet. You know, his mother Isabella of France and her boyfriend, Roger Mortimer, would serve as regents, which means they were actually running things while fronting Edward III as king. And I get the feeling they would have liked to have continued this arrangement for a good bit longer than they did. But when Edward III was 17, he rose up against Roger Mortimer, kicked him out, and began running the country himself. Now, one might ask, how and why does a queen and her boyfriend install a 14-year-old boy as king? Well, apparently his father, King Edward II, was a hot mess personally and a lousy king besides that. At least a lot of people in that time sure seem to have thought so. So Isabella had Edward II deposed in what one might think of as sort of a 14th century divorce, where she gets the kid, the house, all the castles, and the kingdom. Of course, there's a lot more to that story, but we're here today to talk about February 1st, and that is the day in 1327 when Edward III was crowned king at the age of 14. Seems like Edward III was fairly successful for most of his reign and reigned until his death in 1377 at the age of 64. France declared war on the United Kingdom and the Netherlands on February 1st, 1793. This was part of the French Revolutionary Wars, which resulted from the French Revolution, which had started almost 4 years earlier as the government of France underwent some significant growing pains and major upheavals, first establishing a constitutional monarchy and then abolishing the monarchy, executing Louis XVI and his wife, Queen Let Them Eat Cake, Marie Antoinette. All this fracas and upheaval was, of course, disturbing to their neighbors there in Europe. And as with the previous item, there is a lot more to this story, but that's kind of the background to France declaring war on the United Kingdom and Netherlands on February 1st, 1793. And yesterday we mentioned that Congress passed the 13th Amendment, and on this day, February 1st, 1865, President Lincoln signed the 13th Amendment. And just to recap, this is the one that abolished slavery in the United States, abolished slavery and involuntary servitude, except as punishment for a crime. This is the birthday of a man named Erich Adolf von Willebrand, born February 1st, 1870. He was a Finnish doctor, as in from Finland. He's from Finland. He made major contributions to hematology, which is the study of blood and diseases of blood, and von Willebrand disease, which is a hereditary blood clotting disorder, and von Willebrand factor are named after him. Von Willebrand factor, by the way, is a specific protein in the blood that has to do with the blood's ability to clot properly and appropriately. Like, for instance, you want it to clot. If you've nicked your finger on a paper cut and you want it to stop bleeding, you need to be able to clot up and stop that bleeding. But you don't want it to clot so much that you form clots that make you sick, that gum things up, like heart attacks and strokes and stuff. There's got to be a balance there. And von Willebrand factor has to do with that. That is what von Willebrand factor is about. And in addition, Dr. von Willebrand also researched metabolism, obesity, and gout, and was one of the first Finnish physicians to use insulin to treat diabetic coma. Dr. von Willebrand lived to the age of 79.
Tommy James and the Shondells are an American pop band that began as Tom and the Tomatoes in 1959. And Tom, then known as Tommy Jackson, was 12 years old. 3 years later, in 1962, they released a single called Long Ponytail. In 1964, they changed their name to the Shondells in honor of Troy Shondell, a one-hit wonder who had a 1961 song called This Time. The Shondells released the 1964 song Hanky Panky and a few others. But what we're here to talk about today is that as Tommy James and the Shondells, they released a song called Crimson and Clover in 1968. Crimson and Clover spent several weeks on the charts and begins a 2-week run in the #1 spot on the Billboard Hot 100 on February 1st, 1969. Crimson and Clover, Tommy James and the Shondells. Link in the description.
And I think that's going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for watching. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share this video with the link in your email, messaging, or social media. If you enjoy this series, you can check out the playlist that contains these videos. I'll put a link to that in the description. That description lives on YouTube, so for other platforms, I'll include a link to my blog page that is called No Really. You can also find me on Rumble, Parler, BitChute, and Getter. All those links in that description. Alrighty, that's all I can think of right now. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. January 2nd. The 16th. It's all written in Roman numerals, so I had to translate it. Hopefully I got that pronunciation close. Yeah, Annie's ready to go. Flinging happiness all over the place. Alrighty, back to work.